I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel like we're in prison. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. Tired of the madness, done with the sadness. Gonna break free and be unleashed.
Hey, Teacher Peach, we're all just singing back here. I'm Teacher Peach, Visibility Catalyst and Recovering Nice Girl.
And I'm Jenny Badig, the Inner Space Engineer. And welcome to Unleashed AF, the podcast where we help you own your greatness and unleash your authentic self.
Which is mighty powerful, just in case you've forgotten. Today our topic is the leash of patriarchy and how to fight back, very appropriate for the times. Before we dive in, a little bit about each of us. I work with soulful women to annihilate their nice girl training so that you can, speak with power and get shit done.
That's right. And drawing on my background as a human factors engineer and hypnotherapist now, I help rewire your mindset so that you can unlock your true potential. And of course, if you guys enjoy our shows, we want to remind you to like, share, subscribe, follow, depending on where you're watching it from, and drop your thoughts in the comments if you have any questions or want to kind of give us feedback on anything. We love to hear from you.
Awesome. And last week, we were talking about unleashing, understanding racism and how it's so systemic and how we need to fight back against it. And as a follow-up, we put a post on our Facebook page, Unleashed AF Podcast. And on that, we put a post with a whole bunch of a long list of actionable items that you can do to start introducing anti-racism into things that you can do on a day-to-day basis and make a change. And there's also 3 questions for self-reflection. They are on that post at the bottom of the post, but we're going to go ahead and just let you know what those 3 are right now. When was the last, these are 3 questions for self-reflection. 1, when was the last time I challenged a racist statement or action? I know for me, it was always, polite rules society, the polite society rules, which was just walk away, don't say anything, and that doesn't help it. That doesn't help it go away. How am I going to use my privilege to uplift marginalized communities? And what will I do today to contribute to a more equitable world? So
I like that.
To ponder. So today's topic, the leash of patriarchy. And boy, is it a mighty leash. These are all big leashes, honestly. I mean, patriarchy, capitalism, racism, they are basically the 3 main pillars, rules that we all kind of live under, and we need to fight back against them because they are killing us quite literally at the moment.
Yes.
So we need to start out with what is patriarchy. So you want to tackle that for us?
Yeah, I think it's helpful when we talk about these things, when you use specific terms, to really define them, because I think so many terms, communication is very important. And so when terms are used in a variety of ways, so it's different meaning for one person than it is for another, that's where some of the confusion comes. So when we're talking about patriarchy, we're talking about a social power construct that privileges men and marginalizes women. That's all we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens everywhere. It manifests itself in the workplace, and it shows itself with the gender gap. There's a huge pay gap. Between the genders. Family dynamics in so many households. You hear about the man wears the pants of the family. He makes the rules. Whatever the decisions are, they're mine. We're a family.
Mm-hmm.
No, but it's my decision.
Mm-hmm.
And women, of course, staying home and taking care of the family, or even societally, body policing. Oh my gosh. Do you have any examples of body policing for you? I know I have a couple that I'd be happy to share.
Well, I mean, it comes up a lot with the clients that I have coming in terms of either body dysmorphia or body shaming, things like that have happened at some point in their life and
I don't know
changed
if
their
there's a
self-image.
woman alive that doesn't
Yep.
have a story about body policing, body shaming. You
Yep.
can't be a leader. There are all sorts of things that completely marginalizing women from the eyes of men.
Absolutely.
And we're also talking about their supporting structures, right? There are a whole bunch of supporting structures that hold this up. One of them, of course, being religion.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're just so intertwined. Patriarchy certainly is bolstered by religion,
Mm-hmm.
and religion is bolstered by the patriarchy. I mean, they're very, very supportive of one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I wanted to jump in real quick about that is
Absolutely.
I saw something not too long ago and I wasn't able to find it again. So it may have just been a post that somebody did. I couldn't really find it when I searched for like a meme of it or something that talked about, the whole story of Adam and Eve, and the part about Eve being made of Adam's rib was
Mhm.
really just inserted to kind of continue the idea that really a woman is nothing without a man. Like woman came from a man, when in reality every person since Eve had to have come from a woman. Like
Right?
women are who give birth. So they had to get some kind of male thing in there to say that, oh, but in the beginning there wouldn't have even been an Eve if not for Adam's rib.
Oh,
Like,
I wish I had saved this meme, but I came across a meme prior to us talking about this, and it was saying that um, that they had to create God, because women were in control, right? At some point in society, women were in control. They were the nurturers. They ran the villages. Men went off and hunted, brought back. They were the providers. The women were the nurturers, the community, and keeping everything together. And over time, men felt they had less and less power because women had all of this communication and growing society and making things great, and they weren't agreeing with what was going on with the men. The men wanted more control, so the men were like, so we created God to make sure that we can be on top. And that all goes back to religion as well. But it's theory, but it's kind of a fun theory.
mm-hmm. Something to think about.
Something to think about. Because why is that needed unless there's a need to control society?
Right.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And education supports this as well. I have an example. If you have an example you wanted to share.
Go for it. You go first. Yeah.
So growing up, this so irked me when I was a kid, learning how to read, and I had a writing class, and when writing, I kept writing she/he or he/she, and my teacher came to correct me and told me it's never she, it's always he. And I said, well, what if it's referring to, and if you look at textbooks, it's, years ago, it was always he, it was always the masculine. And the masculine was meant to represent both male and female. And so it was always he or him. Well, even our language used to be like that. It was always, you were, I can't think of the name right now. Like you're a policeman. You are a
fireman.
Fireman,
Yeah.
right? It's, you're, I can't think of it, but there are other examples of that. The job for a flight attendant was a stewardess. That was a flight attendant. Stewardess. It was assumed it was going to be a woman because that was a woman's job.
Yeah.
So educationally, that happened as well.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that comes to my mind when you think about education is I can't think of any school I knew of growing up anyway, back in the 70s and 80s, that had females in the administration of the school. Yeah. Plenty of females as teachers. But the principal or vice principal or whoever was, the head of the school.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that, but my principal and vice principal are both male. That's true. Good point. And then we also talked about another supporting pillar being capitalism, which truly benefits from the patriarchy. Well, they believe it benefits from patriarchy staying in power. When truly, I believe that the best system will be in place when there's more equity. And capitalism is not about equity in any shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah.
Patriarchy is not about equity. So it all feeds on each other as well.
Right. And I mean, that I think is pretty obvious for people. You can search, I don't have the exact numbers, but the number of CEOs that are men versus CEOs who are women. If you look at board of directors or board of trustees for corporations, almost exclusively men, especially when you go to the higher, Fortune 500 kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's just not a lot of voice, female voice allowed in those levels.
Yeah, the perfect example that I can think of right now, and I know I'm not alone in thinking this, the perfect example I can see of patriarchy and whiteness truly showing itself in Trump being elected into office rather than Harris.
Mm-hmm.
Here's Harris is a prosecutor, worked her way up through the ranks, became a senator. She was attorney general for California, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And into becoming a vice president. So, very incredibly intelligent, accomplished woman.
Mm-hmm.
Trump, convicted of what, 30, I've lost count. I don't know, 1,000 felonies.
I think.
Okay, 43,
Yeah.
43
Either
felonies.
34 or 43, something like that. It was up there.
Multiple bankruptcies in his business. A history of failure to pay for services rendered, and just a horrible, horrible character of a person.
Mm-hmm. Cheated on every wife he's had, all three of them.
Right?
And then that's not even debatable. That's just fact.
That's just fact. That is just fact.
And the thing that was so frustrating to me, one thing that was so frustrating to me was with all of that, that's just, like I said, it's fact. It's not opinion. That's fact.
Yeah.
I saw a few people on social media talking about, oh, Kamala slept her way to the top. And I'm thinking, how in the world do you ignore what this man has done? And there's nothing that I saw ever that said
that's exactly what I think that's exactly why this is such a convincing demonstration of patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's a man that is barely qualified, is giving qualified too much.
Right.
It's hurting qualified. We're hurting that word.
Yeah.
He is not qualified for office. We saw what happened the last time he went to office. We almost had an overtaking of our government the last time he was in office. And so here comes an incredibly qualified woman who happens to also be Black. And suddenly this highly unqualified person, this man, saying, we hate women so much that we would rather put back into office the person that tried to destroy our government than put a Black woman in office.
Yep.
And to me, that's just the epitome of racism, patriarchy, misogyny. I mean, just name it.
Well, and the other thing that was ridiculous to me, and how anybody could look past this, I don't understand, was when he said, well, I don't know, I guess now she's Black. I didn't know she was Black. I thought she was Indian. To not even understand how.
Well, and purposely saying her name wrong all the time. I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it just goes on and on.
Yeah.
So it's and we were talking before we started the show. You and I were talking about why is patriarchy in place and what is the benefit of it? And to me, it's just such a huge lie that men made up one day, and somehow over time women started believing it. that men were in power and more powerful, and we weren't powerful. And a lot of these narratives were coming from men. But patriarchy keeps men in power without having any need to struggle for it.
Yep.
And nothing epitomizes that more than Trump coming into office for a second time.
Yep. Yeah. And I think I want to say, when I think back to even as a kid watching shows like Little House on the Prairie and stuff like that, where it kind of demonstrated like, oh, the father goes out and he, gets the food and brings it home, whatever. I mean, mom ran the household because she was there all the time. But it's like, oh, I'm going to go do manly things and go hunt or go whatever. And like you were saying, that's not how it was always, throughout history, or at least not in some cultures. But depicting things like, oh, this is the regular order of things. And then, of course, you move forward in shows and it's like Leave It to Beaver, the mom stays home and the dad's
Father knows
off at
best.
work. Yep. All those things just reiterate or reinforce that idea of those gender roles. I really do think that a big part of what started to define those gender roles, at least in terms of home life, were those kinds of TV shows.
Oh, I think they were huge in helping to push the narrative forward. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting because it was not that long ago, and I'm saying in the last 2 or 3 years, I believe it was, there was an archaeologist was going over the findings of a previous archaeological find. Don't say that too many times too fast. And noted as they were reviewing the finds, the remnants, that this warrior that had always been depicted as male because it had like a couple of horses in there, and there were all of these different trophies and weapons, and so they're like, oh, this is an amazing warrior, a male warrior, and look, he must have been he. And then they found out after going back over the archaeological find, which happened years and years and years ago, that, oh no, look at the structure of this body. This is a female, guys. This is a female. And they're finding, as they're going back and looking at remains, that there was more than that. And these are Viking remains from like the 1600s.
Mm-hmm.
And these big, huge warriors were actually women. And so this story that we've been fed, that women are always just at home nurturing and the men are always out hunting and gathering, but that's not necessarily true either. That there were women that were highly recognized. I mean, even Greek mythology, you have Athena was the warrior. Mm-hmm. Right? There's lots of examples of women being warriors. And I think over time, the patriarchy has taken hold and just taken women out of any of those roles to let us know that, we are incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
But they can keep the power.
Yep. And, another thing that I had talked to you about when we were discussing the podcast earlier was the fact that through DNA testing, like if you do the 23andMe or Ancestry or whatever thing you do, they look like family tree kind of thing. They actually have found that they can trace everyone, male and female, back to what they call a mitochondrial Eve, who would have lived like around 180,000 years ago. And then there is sort of what they're calling they're just calling him a Y chromosomal atom that not everyone, but all living men can be traced back to, but he only lived 50,000 years ago. So there's so much more of a consistent or like a bloodline that you can trace through women.
Back to Eve, yeah.
Yeah.
Then you can back to Adam. Well, you can, but Adam is like 50,000 and Eve's 180,000, right?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So it's
not something you hear in the Bible.
It's what it says. And so what's interesting is, we have it's daunting. I mean, here we've just this country has elected a president that is the epitome of patriarchy, and so we are under these systems, And, this show is all about breaking free. So let's talk about, I think we came up with a list of 9. We came up with a list of 9 different ways to break free from the patriarchy. We're going to focus on 3. We went through them. We're like, well, which ones do we think are, well, they're all powerful, but we needed to pick. We can't go over all of them. The show would go on for hours.
Right.
So we're gonna focus on 3 of them. And the first one is using your power voice. And when I'm talking about a power voice, I'm talking about saying what you really mean. Women have been trained to say things that they don't really mean to make sure that they keep men happy, or keep them from getting upset, or to keep them calm, or men have no idea just how much we help to regulate their emotions. And using your power voice, though, is when you can go inside and go, okay, this is my voice. This is what I think. This is what I really want to say. And to be able to say it without shaking. To be able to shake it without tremoring. To be able to say it without worrying about what the repercussions are going to be. To be able to say it with freedom because it's who you are, and you care more about you than you care about how it's going to affect the other person, especially since it's true for you. So one of the things, there were a few of them here, and if you want to jump in here on any of these, please jump in here, Jenny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking up in meetings. This one I love. It reminds me of, I used to be in meetings and work. I used to work in corporate America, and if I spoke up, it seemed like almost every time I spoke up, a man would jump in and interrupt me. And I never knew how to deal with it. Years ago, I didn't know how to deal with it. And there's a man who says that every single time he's in a meeting with other women, that if one of the women gets interrupted, he will cut off the guy. And he's like, excuse me, she was speaking. But you can also do the same thing for yourself. It's much harder to speak for yourself. But stopping or reclaiming your time. I love that. Reclaiming your time by saying, excuse me, but I wasn't finished speaking. Yep. It's a simple statement, but men aren't used to hearing it. And if you are the first one saying it, it's kind of like
Caesar Milan with the
it's like a Caesar Milan like this.
Yeah.
I wasn't finished speaking. And not angrily or just matter of fact. I wasn't finished speaking.
I just gotta say, the image of doing that. I mean, I also worked for a large corporation as an engineer, a female engineer. So, most of those meeting rooms were full of men. And the idea of going up to one of them and doing
kind of makes you feel a little giddy inside, doesn't it?
Oh my God. Oh, that would, for some of them, that would have been so gratifying. I was kind of lucky, actually. There were a good number of very accepting and open type of men that I worked with. Not all of them. There were definitely some that were rude and would cut in and stuff like that. And I did stand up to them at times. And so sometimes you have to think about what's going to be most effective for me to handle this situation.
Yes.
If it's some guy who is not going to learn from being made fun of in front of other people or being called out in front of other people, you might want to try to have a private conversation after with them and try to keep it from happening again in the future. If it's someone that you think, I need to put him in his place, then you do that, and then other people will see it too, and they can see kind of the trend. They can see it for what it is. Because I truly believe, especially after my experience working with a bunch of male engineers, some of them are just kind of clueless about it. They don't even realize that what they're saying is denigrating or rude or whatever.
I'm going to bet you money, though. I would bet you money, though, that, and you're right, that is a kind way of doing it, taking them aside and saying something. But I'll bet you money, even if that person is receptive to it, because it's so ingrained and a part of who they are, it's still going to happen. And so it's something you still need to be prepared to say at some point, because it's going to happen again. And the other thing you can do is you can also stand up for other women. If you're in a meeting and a woman gets interrupted, learn to start recognizing it.
Yep.
Learn to recognize it. It's out there. We're so used to hearing women interrupted and shut down that sometimes we're not even recognizing it. So start recognizing it. And you could say something like, hey, excuse me, I'd like to hear so-and-so, whoever the woman is, I'd like to hear so-and-so finish her point.
Yeah.
Do this for other women. Do this for Black people in your organization. Do this for other members of the
Any marginalized
any
group.
marginalized. That's the word. Any marginalized group. Please just stand up for them.
And didn't Kamala in one of the debates do this for herself? Say, I'm sorry, I was still speaking, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to.
Absolutely.
And there may be a case where whoever you say that to, or whoever's watching or whatever, will try to turn it into, oh, well, she's just being a bitch or she's being rude. But you can't let that stop you.
Yeah.
As long as you, I mean, you don't have to have an attitude about it that gives them more fodder to say that. But as long as you're standing strong and, hey, I wasn't finished speaking, you're completely solid in the fact that you had every right to finish what you were saying. It only makes them look bad.
Right.
To say anything bad about it.
And the other thing I really like is challenging roles. So say you get into a meeting and then they need a secretary. It's almost always given to a woman, or a woman will volunteer. Stop. Challenge the gender norms. I know there's a CEO, love this woman. I can't remember her name. I'm sorry. She is in the meeting and she says every single time she has the opportunity, she assigns the note-taking to a male in the group. Every single time. And she said, it's been done to us for years. It has nothing to do with gender. And they should absolutely be taking these roles sometimes. So because she's in a position to do that, she does that. And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, if somebody says, would you take notes? I've taken notes 5 times. If someone else would do that, that would be great. Nothing wrong with that. It's okay to say no. No is a complete sentence.
Yep. Although I will also tell you, this reminds me of several years ago when I was on the board of the spiritual community that I was involved with. I was kind of new to the board, and there was a male that was the secretary of the board. And so he was the one that would do the notes and the actions and whatever from the board meeting. And after seeing a couple of his reports, from, okay, these are the notes from last time, I'm like, this has no detail information whatsoever. I have no idea what happened in that meeting.
But sometimes that is purposeful incompetence.
Yeah. I don't think it was in this case. He was an older guy,
but sometimes that's exactly what that is. Or weaponized, that's what it's called, weaponized incompetence.
Yep. But it also points out that sometimes they're not as good at things as they may make you think. Oh. Like in that case, I volunteered to take the notes because I was tired of reading like 2 sentences about the last 2-hour meeting that we had. I'm like, can I take the notes? Let me show you how it should be done. Oh my God. But it wasn't like, oh, ask Jenny, she's the girl. It was more like, okay, let me show you how I can do the notes. Maybe you can then take them over again and do them correctly.
Yeah, another thing that you can do is set boundaries. I mean, all of this is really about setting boundaries.
Yeah.
But you can set other kinds of boundaries, like if you are asked to do something when you're exhausted, to say no.
Yep.
So that you can't take that on. I had a friend of mine who, anytime she was in a job, she was also asked to mentor other people because she had this calm demeanor. And so she was asked, unpaid, to go and mentor this other person. Mm-hmm. And she said, oh my gosh, I just have so much going on. I can't do it. I'm like, well, then stop. Oh, I can't. And everything about her was like, oh, but what if I'm not perceived as a good person? And you could just see her shrink. Oh, what if? But the moment she was able to stand up and say no, it freed her from that burden. Was the person upset? Yes. But was she happy with herself? Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think
She
another
felt
thing that
better.
can help kind of fortify that is if you're asked to do something and you think, would a man be able to say no to this and walk away without, feeling like he let anybody down? Well, then so can you. Like to demonstrate that it's not, you don't have to stick with that kind of gender role. If a man could walk away from it or say no without any consequence, so can you.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
another thing that I wanted to kind of throw in there in terms of gender bias
Yeah,
or setting
please.
boundaries, sometimes just the language that people use that they may not realize, or maybe they do, but so often we just fall into, oh, this is what I always say, or I'm just joking or whatever. But to start to maybe call some people out when the jokes or the way they're referring to certain things has an obvious gender
Mhm.
assessment to it. And there was a meme. I found it earlier, but I can't find it now to show everyone. But that it talked about how so many people will say, "Oh, she's just a pussy," or "He's a pussy," or something like that,
Oh,
implying
yeah.
weakness.
Yeah.
But then the meme points out that's where life comes from. Like, there's a lot of strong stuff that happens in that area for
Yeah.
women, and the thing that is weaker and can't take a hit or even like a little flick is a
Is
ball sack.
male. Yeah.
So
And yeah, and it's interesting because it becomes so much a part of vernacular. And all of the words for weakness or
mhm,
less than or anything derogatory, it's either a word from a part of the female body or something that refers to a female or also refers to another marginalized group.
mhm,
Uh, and that does not, they become so much a part of our everyday vernacular that women have taken on those words as well, like you
yep,
just said.
yep,
Or using, well, heck, if you want to beep it, but bitch, right? So bitch, which we used growing up because my parents bred dogs, and so the
mm,
female dog was the bitch of the litter,
mhm,
and it's so interesting when I grew up because that's how I heard it growing up. It
mhm,
it had no weight to it,
right.
and then to hear it thrown around as
A
a
slur kind of,
derogatory or a
yeah,
slur. And that it was so surprising to me. And it should, probably people who didn't grow up with that are like, yeah, that's really weird. But that's words only have meaning in context.
right.
And outside of the context of raising dogs, bitch is incredibly derogatory.
Mhm,
But again, it's referring to a female.
mhm,
And yeah, I'm really glad you pulled that up because we've changed that in our household where if something we want to use a word just between us, we're hanging out and like, oh, you're such a ball sack.
nice.
That's just kind of fun.
You're such a scrotum.
You're such a scrotum. That's funny. So we're trying to catch ourselves
Mhm,
because and we don't want to do it to the male parts either, but for right now as we are deconstructing and helping ourselves, there is during that adjustment period it is kind of fun to do the reverse side of it, which it's kind of healing
yeah,
until you can get to a point where you're like, okay, let's not use male female terms at all. let's just let's just use something else.
yeah.
But yeah.
And I
So
kind of wonder, honestly, if
mhm,
that's what will eventually happen, hopefully, with racism in this country, because the N word obviously was used in a very derogatory way by white people for many years.
mhm,
The N word now is used by black people as a term of almost brotherhood, or like they can use it with each other, but white people aren't allowed to use it anymore.
mhm.
And so it's sort of like the backlash from, we reclaim this word. But then eventually, hopefully, they'll get to a point where, like, let's just retire the word altogether.
Well, it's interesting because the LGBTQ community has gone through that as well with the word queer. Queer has always been in the past a derogatory term used to slur a member of the alphabet squad. And now, I call myself queer. I am queer. It's still really difficult for my wife to hear that word because to her, it's always been a derogatory term. And for me and other people in my age bracket, we want to claim it. We're like, yeah, I am queer. It can't hurt me because that's what I am. You're right. You're right. But it means something different to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's important. Words are important. I wish that saying growing up, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's such a fallacy. I think that parents were trying to help with bullying.
Yeah.
That wasn't the answer. But this show's not about bullying at the moment.
Right.
Well, let's move on to the next one that we were going to go in. What's the next one we were going to go through?
We're talking about supporting other women, mentoring them, amplifying their voices, things like that. And I can tell you, there was an organization, there still is, I'm sure, but I'm not working as an engineer anymore. An organization called SWE, which was the Society of Women Engineers. And it was great to know that was there as like I said, kind of a support structure. It's where women engineers could kind of come together and see that, hey, I'm not the only one. Because typically it wasn't like, oh, SWE within your little part, you were alone in your part amongst all the other men engineers. And then you could go to these SWE events and go, oh, there's other women.
There's other women.
Right.
Right.
So that was very helpful. And they had all kinds of programs, not only to support each other if you're already in the workforce, but also for, young girls who were looking to go into science and engineering and stuff like that, still in school, programs to help support them. So that was one of the nice things I remember about my time as an engineer, is having those kinds of structures out there for support and mentoring.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's one of the reasons why networking groups are so important. And I remember the big backlash back in the 90s. There was a big backlash against having women-only networking groups. And there was such a backlash that you actually can't exclude men from your networking group. You can advertise for women, but you can't block a man from coming into the group, which is very interesting.
Because there are definitely still male-only groups out there.
Yeah, and I don't have any problem with women-only groups. I think they're fantastic, and we're able to share things that are very difficult to share when men are present because of the power dynamic structure. But yeah, and reaching out to people, if you are in something like an SWE or a networking event, and there's a woman that hasn't been coming, or you don't know if they know about it, invite them to be a part of it, because they may not know that support is there for them.
Yep. And especially now with what's going on, there's so many women, I think, in our country anyway, who are concerned about what's going to happen in the next 4 years, what kinds of, threats we'll face, what kind of freedoms will be taken away. And so finding community, social media seems like the easiest way to find community in a large context, because if you're in a small community physically, it may be hard to find people that are like-minded or something like that where you are locally, but you can find it on social media. And a couple of the people that I follow that I really am interested in seeing what their posts are and stuff like that. I follow Elizabeth Warren, who is senator from
Yeah,
Connecticut. or Massachusetts, I think.
I think it might be Massachusetts.
Yeah, I think it's Massachusetts. She's posting stuff about what they're still trying to do in terms of, putting things in place, protecting things. So it's nice to follow her. There's also an account on Instagram that I think it's A Girl Has No President.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
And she posts a lot of empowering kind of things, informational or empowering or encouraging or whatever. People like Michelle Obama or Oprah, people that are just really out there to try to stand up for women in general, women's rights, in an uplifting, supportive kind of way. The more we can not only follow them, but share, to our pages what they have so that it gets even more coverage or more people see it. I think those kinds of things are little ways. We talked last week about what are you doing about it? If you're not actively doing something to change this, you're kind of part of the problem. So even
Right.
those little things can help to spread awareness or spread just a different perspective that maybe people haven't thought of or whatever, even if it's people on your, who are your friends with on social media or whatever, that may not think the same way that you do. But when you share it, maybe something will hit them differently when they see something, because it's not you spewing it. If they're thinking, I'm just going to come back at whatever you say because I know you're on the other side. If they just see it from a different perspective, maybe something will sink in. So
yeah, and I know it takes a little extra work because there are men that are constantly being advanced in either newspapers, but socially they're being pushed forward. For example, if you're looking for a quote for somebody for transformation, one of the first words that may pop into your mind is Tony Robbins. Well, that's just lazy thinking. Because there are lots of women, trust me, that have way more incredible things to say than Tony Robbins.
Mm-hmm.
And they're coming from a female perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Look for them. Okay.
Yeah.
And even AI gets it twisted, because I asked for a list of women that were motivational speakers on a particular topic. And out of the 20, I think I asked for 20. Asked for 20. And out of that 20, it put 4 men. And I had to tell it, no, these are men. Oh, I'm so sorry. And came back and still put a man in the list. So, but AI has been trained by data from the internet. Where was a majority of that where the majority of that information come from? Men. There are a lot more women now, but we can help each other by making sure we're promoting each other. Look for books by women. Look for books by marginalized women. Look for quotes by women and share those. We forget how powerful we are because we're always told we're not, but we can tell each other we are and help to elevate us.
Yep. Look for workshops or training opportunities or whatever by women. Yeah. All that. Yep.
Yeah. And if we're supporting each other, we start eliminating that competition from each other, because if we're supporting each other, if we're all supporting each other, we're all going to rise up. It's so easy right now. And I know it's so easy right now to be looking down on what's going on, because every day if you turn on the TV, you're going to see some kind of crazy. So I highly encourage you to stop and start thinking about the life you want for yourself, the life you want in this nation.
Yep.
And start manifesting it by going after it. And don't let yourself be pulled away and downtrodden and beaten up by a system who is definitely trying to do that to you right now. They want us distracted so that we don't fight for each other, so that we don't fight against what is happening. So you can do this, I promise you.
Right. And an epic envisioning experience would be a good way to figure out what you're focused on or what you want clarity about, how to go forward.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and talk about that one before we get to this last one?
Well, I mean, epic envisioning experience is a workshop that I do virtually that goes through a whole process. It takes a few hours, but it helps you get clarity. It helps dive into your subconscious and create not only an image of what you want to see happening in your life, where you want to go with your life, but gives you a whole, it's like if you've just done sort of some basic manifesting type techniques in the past, either a vision board or put Post-its on the wall or something like that, that's sort of like a black and white sketch. The epic envisioning experience sort of turns that into a full color 3D HD kind of situation where it's engaging more of your senses. So it's got more of your subconscious's attention and helps just make it quicker and more efficient to actually get there. So,
and you can purchase that one-off from Jenny, or you can join our group, which is coming up, called Unleash AF, the Mind Shift. And that will be a part of that group.
yeah.
Jenny didn't know that, but we just talked about it.
Yeah,
Who
no,
knows now?
hypnohuddle.com is where you can go if you just
There you
want to
go.
do that epic envisioning experience. You can go to a link there. There's a few of those that I have scheduled. At some point, I'll probably also put one out there that's just pre-recorded, and so you can do it on demand. But right now I'm trying to do some more that are live, so that, because it is more interactive when it's live. But I can also see the advantage to having it where people can just do it at their own pace or on their own time. So
I definitely highly recommend it. So please go ahead and check that out. So let's go to the last one that we have here that we were going to do today, which is unlearn internalized patriarchy, which is pretty much what we've been trying to talk about this entire time. But it is so important for you to start recognizing how patriarchy shows up in your life, how it shows up around you, and how you participate in it. Because we do, just like we participate in racism and we participate in capitalism, we also participate in patriarchy. And you can't stop its control over you until you can start recognizing it. So you have to recognize that it's even there. And I love some of these ideas. One of the ones that was most difficult for me, and one that a lot of my clients struggle with, which is equating your worth with productivity or self-sacrifice. I remember when I used to go to church, and the kind of gold star on everybody's chest was, I am so exhausted. And somebody would come back with their little gold star and say, you can sleep after you die and go to heaven. And I mean, I say that all kind of funny, but we have that same kind of mentality. There's this mentality that as a woman, that your value is in how much you give. Your value is in how much you produce. Your value is in how much you do. Your time being used up is your value. When that is so not true, that you are allowed to rest.
Right.
You are allowed to be whole. You are allowed to heal. And just because you're not working, it does not limit or decrease or make your value go away. You're still just as valuable.
Right.
I mean, if I take my dollar bill, if I take my $10 bill and I go get a coffee, right? That $10 is the same thing if I'm using it or if it's in my pocket. It's still $10. If you have $1 million personality and you have the ability to make $1 million, it doesn't matter whether you're doing it at the moment or not, you're still worth that. And that's a hard concept for a lot of women to see. You are worthy of rest.
Yes.
Ask Donald Trump and all of the golfing trips he goes to when he's president.
Right.
I digress.
Right. Well, and the other thing that reminds me of is the old adage on an airplane of put your oxygen mask on first, or else you aren't able to help those around you. So even if you're traveling with your child, you need to put your oxygen mask on first and then put the one on them. Because if you try putting one on them and they're struggling or whatever, you may not ever get one on your own face. Another thing that came up not too long ago, within the last week or so, that I saw is a little video, an interview that talked about how women are much more likely to have an autoimmune disease than men.
Oh, yeah.
And this, I can't remember if he was a professor or doctor or researcher. I can't remember what his title was, but he was saying basically it's because women have been sort of trained over the years to put other people in front of themselves. So they're more focused on care outside of themselves than taking care of themselves. And therefore they hold more stress, they hold more worry, they hold this, the sense of responsibility is heavy. And so it weakens their immune system.
Yeah.
And therefore an autoimmune disorder is able to kick right in and really kind of wear them down. So that was huge. When I saw that, I'm like, this is not a huge surprise to me, but
No, but
I never really looked at the numbers or knew that there was an actual correlation between autoimmune diseases and women.
Wow. Makes so much sense though.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
And another thing you could do, and this has to do with nice girl training, which sits underneath patriarchy, right? Because patriarchy is all about men being in power. Then you have the rules of polite society, right? Don't talk about race, don't talk about politics, and don't talk about
religion.
Thank you. Those three things.
That's why we're a pair.
That's right. And then underneath of that, right? So that's the rules for polite society. And then underneath of that, women get their own special playbook, right? They have whole another set of rules they're supposed to follow, which I call nice girl training, which is all about, respecting your elders, making sure that you are appealing to everybody around you, making sure that you don't cause a stir, that you don't cause a disruption.
Don't rock the boat.
Don't rock the boat. Smile when you're asked. You're so much prettier when you smile. Lose weight. There's all these rules that go into nice girl training. And so it's really important to deconstruct those, because until you deconstruct all of the different ways that the patriarchy wants you to behave, you can't do otherwise because it's hard to recognize.
Yeah.
So deconstruct those things. And just real briefly, want to remind everybody we do have Unleashed AF, the Mind Shift, coming up. If you just leave a message for us, we'll get in touch with you. We are doing a very high selection for people that are going to be a part of this group. It's an 8-week course with a year-long group effort, a part of it. We'd love to have you there. Just leave us a comment and we'll get in touch with you. And we have anything else we wanted to, we're getting to the end of we could keep on talking. We're getting to the end of our hour here. Was there anything else you wanted to talk to or add here?
Well, we are going to post that entire list.
Yes.
We kind of handpicked or cherry picked a few main ideas to talk about during the pod, but we're going to post that entire list for you to view as a separate post on Facebook.
Absolutely.
So that, if there's something else that kind of grabs your attention, or, oh no, I can definitely make a difference here. Maybe not so much in the areas they were talking about, but this is my area and I can really make a difference there. Just to share the information.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's see. I just want to see if there's anything else in here. Yeah. So if there's anything, sorry, I should have read the rest of the notes before I tried finishing up. Put something into action. Our goal of this isn't for you just to listen, but to put something into action. So put something into action. If there's something that struck you, you're like, wow, I'm not doing that right now. Do that. If you try to tackle everything at once, you're just going to get overwhelmed. So pick one and start there. Because every day that there's a little effort, it just adds up, and it'll be incredibly, what is that called? The compound effect? Yeah, the compound effect. If you just do a little bit every day, it's amazing what you'll end up with in the end. It's also the same concept behind Chinese torture. Anyway.
Coincidence? I think not.
ADHD brains. Here we are. So next week's episode, this will be fun. The Leash of Religion. We are going to be talking quite a bit about Christian nationalism, because religion and Christian nationalism, they're tied in together. They are not one and the same.
Right.
So we want to make sure we talk about this. If you've enjoyed today's episode, subscribe, follow, and share. Love to hear from you as well. If you have a topic question or want to be a guest, visit unleashedafpodcast.com and go to WWJDD. What would Jenny and Deidre do? We'd love to hear from you.
That's right.
Anything else, Jenny?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And until next week, I don't know. Do shit.
Do good shit.
Do good shit. Take care.
I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel